Welcome to the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast brought to you by ProudMouth. I'm your host, Matt Halloran. Being your own loud is not new to marketing, but the mindset, strategies, and resources to help you get there are evolving faster than this industry is keeping up. It is time to find a new perspective on what works why and how to move your business forward. Listen as I interview guests to help you learn from them how to be your own loud. Let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Top Advisory Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Halloran. Is what you would normally hear, but I'm not Matt Halloran. I'm Aric Johnson. I get the honor of interviewing Matt. Matt, what's going on?
Well, a lot of stuff, man. We just got back from, you and I just got back from our first conference that we've attended really since before COVID or BC. And kind of wanted to just chat a little bit about what we saw, why we did it, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so how'd it feel? How did it feel to be back on the road? It's been quite a while.
It was exhausting, man. Like, I forgot what it's like to literally be on from sun up to sundown, right? But it was wonderful. You and I are both people who love human beings, and it was just really nice to be in the presence of human beings. It was really nice to connect with some of the people. Like, we were at the EWAS conference. We've got 4 clients there who are existing clients. It was wonderful to see them. I saw a whole bunch of advisors who I haven't seen in many, many, many years from back in my coaching days.
You and I have been working from home for a really long time.
It was
And I just kept thinking,
exhausting.
this is a lot of walking. We weren't running, we weren't jogging, we weren't on ellipticals, we weren't doing stair climbers, we had elevators. It wasn't that strenuous, but my body's like, why are you walking so much? What is going on? It was a huge conference area. I mean, beautiful, beautiful location. And it was in Florida. I mean, I don't know about you, but coming home last night, literally, and I do this on most flights, but like I would open the window because we flew into Detroit together, right? I opened the window as though I'm checking to make sure the pilot's going the right way, right? Like, I have no idea. I mean, it's just something I do, but every time I open, I'm like, am I checking on him but I'm seeing the ground and it's frozen and it's snowy.
Frozen. Totally.
Yeah. And so the first thing I did is, of course, I put on Led Zeppelin, the Immigrant Song, because one of the first lines is Land of the Ice and Snow. And I'm like, here we go. Now we're coming back. So being in that nice warm weather, that was a huge bonus, right? And being tired, that was an after effect, during the event. Seeing your clients, you mentioned that, and new clients, which is fantastic. We've got some new podcasters, which I'm very excited about. But what was it like to just be in that mix? I mean, we've been to a lot of different conferences, you and I. Be in a conference where it's purely educational and almost a mentoring atmosphere. I believe that's what Brian and Randy really had as the reason they started this. How did that feel?
I thought it was amazing, and that's one of the reasons why we chose that conference. But the other thing was an unintended but brilliant consequence of them doing that conference is not only do they limit the amount of advisors that come in, but they allow the advisors to bring in their implementers. I thought, Aric, that was such a huge game changer because a lot of these are so advisor centric. And then you and I both know the advisors get home, they've got 8 million ideas that they're super excited to execute, and the team has no idea what they're talking about. Whereas in this conference, they're sitting side by side with their decision maker or implementer, really, mostly decision maker. I think we can do this. So from a vendor standpoint or from a speaker standpoint, it's really neat to have that support structure in place. And we had somebody who came up to booth close to the end of the time that we were there. And he said, this is my number 2. And she's the one who asked almost all of the questions about implementation. How do we execute? And of course, we have those problems solved. I really, really liked that. Some of the speakers were so good. And I thought that the topics that they also covered were so timely. HR was a huge component of what was going on at the thing because a lot of advisors are still really struggling from this remote thing. And now, do we keep remote? Do we not keep remote? I really like that. strategic coach was there. So they had some really great mentoring coaching programs that were there. And of course, then the pieces of technology that the advisors really love that I just don't pay a lot of attention to.
The thing that got me was this was almost like a iron sharpening iron event, right? It was because of exactly what you meant, because the implementers were allowed to go. I sat at tables during lunch and dinner when we mingled at dinner where you would have the advisor there, two advisors there, both of them have their implementers there, and the four of them are talking about what one of the speakers was talking about, right? So not only do you have the fact that you have a second person there that will take better notes than you as an advisor, they will have better little notes on how we can implement because they're the implementer, that's their job. You can immediately take away from one of those discussions and then have a brainstorming session just with your implementer and get more ideas on paper than if you're alone and have to think about, okay, what's the next presenter? Who's the next speaker? Who do I need to go connect with? And I think it really gave a lot of freedom, almost like a masterminds group, really, because like you said, it's limited to 100. That's it. And Brian has no plans to increase that, 100 advisors. You get to actually mingle with people that are top of their game like you and discuss those types of ideas. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Give me some other takeaways from this event. I mean, you interviewed a couple people while we were there. And I'll tell you, if people could see the setup that we had, it was number one, it was a beautiful setup, beautiful location for what location it was. It's this grand hallway, if you will. I don't know, how high were those ceilings? 30 feet, 50
Oh
feet?
yeah. Oh my gosh, they were huge.
You were huge. Terrible for audio normally, right? But you had the equipment. We brought the equipment. We know what we're doing there. But you had some interviews. How did those go? How did you feel that people received those? And tell me about a couple of your guests, or tell the audience a couple of guests. I was right there with you.
What I absolutely love, one of my favorite parts about going to conferences is meeting other vendors, right? Meeting other people who provide services to financial advisors. And the first one was Andrea. She runs Ironstone, which is a consulting company, and she really focuses on HR and employee development. She just blew me away. First off, it's always really nice at these conferences to get speakers before they're on stage because they're basically practicing their gig with you. So they got all their talking points down. They have all of their stuff ready. They're just testing some things. And I really, really loved that. Then I interviewed somebody who his startup has grown 113 times over the last, what did he say, 3 years? Do you remember?
It was a very low number. Let's just put it that way. It was crazy how much he's grown.
And this guy is an ex-fighter pilot in the United States Air Force and started something called Jet It. And the website was gojetit.com. But the fascinating thing about it is we actually talked about his marketing and his business growth and development. I mean, yes, he definitely talked about the products and services that he offered, but I really just wanted to pick his brain about that stuff. And as a content marketing company, which is really what we are, and we're in the business of creating content, Aric, I probably never would have gotten that dude, right? I never would have had the opportunity to just grab him and say, "Oh my God, I really want to interview you," because our paths would not have crossed otherwise. And I don't know, man. I just think that that's a lot of fun. Of course, I love interviewing people like you do. But that was one of so those two guests were the ones that really stood out that I think they're going to be great podcasts when they come out on this show. But at the same time, they were just really super cool people to meet.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. That was Glenn, correct?
Yeah. Glenn Gonzalez is his name. Yeah.
When he came over and engaged us and was talking to you, I was watching him and just listening to him and just fascinated, first of all, because I've always had a dream of piloting something, mainly helicopters, but I don't know. Anyway, he was probably one of the most humble people there. Him and Brian Sweet, right there. They carry themselves just as very humble people that have a ton of experience but don't flaunt it. They'll just be open to sharing and open to conversation. And I did not, probably one of the quietest, most successful people I've ever met in my life. And that just impressed me alone. So I'm really looking forward to the interview because I couldn't hear it because I was talking to other people, but I saw you guys having a great time.
The funniest part about it, Aric, is then on day two, we had pilotwealth.com show up, right? That financial advisor specifically focuses on pilots as his niche. Man, talk about a brand. See, that's the other super cool thing about these things is you get to meet people. In fact, one of the people who became a client immediately with us, which of course I credit you 1,000,000% on, but he already had a podcast. And I don't think a lot of people understand that we get a lot of people who come through our process and system who already have shows, but they're not getting the success or the results. In fact, I just had a call this morning. So this is a perfect piggyback on you with Jeremy, our new client. But I had a call today with a gentleman. He's 22 episodes in, so he's been doing this for a bit. He said, Matt, here's the deal is I don't know what I don't know, and I'm only just doing the show, so I don't do all of the other stuff that you do. And so I said, okay, so here's like 3 or 4 things that I see. First off, his microphone was terrible. They told him to buy the wrong mic. He had a blue, like a snowball, in a really echoey room. And I'm like, who told you to do that, man? Oh.
I thought you were going to say Yeti Blue, which is okay, but a snowball is meant for a conference room.
Yeah. To pick up everything. And he's like, yeah,
Yes.
Matt, it does pick up everything. Yeah, well, we do know that. The podcast coaching component, Aric, telling people what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, and what they can improve on. Nobody does that. So the people there now, this is a highly produced podcast. He's got a professional radio voice co-host. He's got a great intro and outro. His cover art's good, but his summary game wasn't very good. No hashtags, no keywords, no actual points. So there wasn't anything that search engines could grab onto and say, "Ooh, you should listen to this because this answers your question." And then on top of that, he has no social media presence with his podcast. So as I'm going through these things, he's just blown away. And that's the same thing with Jeremy. Jeremy already had a podcast. He's got his intro, outro. He's got his cover art. He's got all that stuff set up. But what he doesn't have is really the experts in the background helping him become better. And then finally, one of the cool things about Jeremy, our new client, that he was so excited about was not just the podcast coaching, but the podcast audits that we do every quarter when we grade them. But the most important thing is the formatting of our 9 podcast growth tactics. And, when I have somebody who doesn't have a podcast, none of that really makes sense because they don't have a show already. Right, brother? I mean, they're just like, whatever, I just need to start a podcast. But the people who've started their podcast and they're not seeing the great success that they want. And then when you tell them about how we help them grow their podcast, it's a very, very different conversation. And we had more of those. Like we had a couple of people who were like, well, I know I need to start a podcast and I know I'm going to use you. But then the conversations I love even more are the people who have a podcast and that you did such a good job of like listening to it. You took a bunch of notes. And so when you met with them, you say, here's a couple of things you can change, add value. If they want to use us, wonderful, but adding value. And I think you did a great job with that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. I learned from the best. Anyway, so I got to mention one more person, and I'm not going to mention him by name because we're going to be talking this coming week, and I'm very excited about this. But when we got into the conversation, he let me know that he had 13 people in his office. He is the primary. He is wildly successful. And when we started talking about that, our podcasting systems, really the 9 steps, and I started asking him about, well, how connected locally are you? How connected to other business owners are you? He's like, oh, absolutely. Why? What are you talking about? I said, well, we have a guest coaching system that we will teach you how to get guests, what guests to get, what's your best, and then I can't go into the explanation here, but kind of what our system is, and his eyes got about as big as saucers. And then there was this sparkle, and I was like, oh man, something's coming. He said, you have no idea the people that I'm connected with just because of the work that we've been doing. And he rattled off a few, which again, will remain nameless, but they're semi-famous people. There are some people that everybody that would be listening to this would know exactly, for instance, a certain restaurant chain that he knows the founder of. He's going to be able to interview that person on his podcast and get incredible traction, get opened up to a network that he has not been opened up to yet before. Because like I tell everybody, if you were to ask someone, a business associate, hey, do you mind if I jump in your email database and send an email out to everybody you know? People would laugh you away. They would block you on all social media. They'd be like, you're crazy. Why are you even asking? Here's the thing. If you have somebody, a COI, on your podcast as a guest, they are going to send that out to their entire email database. They're going to put it on every social media platform they have because it's free marketing for them. And hence it is then free marketing for you.
Hey, Matt here, just jumping in to add something real quick. If you're listening to this conversation and thinking, Matt, I have people in my network I can interview, and hell, I could even interview my freaking team about all the problems that we solve for our clients, then dude, you know what? You've got to start your own podcast, and I'm going to show you how. Join the PodRocket Academy for free and get access to my Podcasting 101 course, How to Start Your Own Podcast. To start this course, all you have to do is join the PodRocket Academy at proudmouth.com/episode 349.
So he's super excited about it. I can't wait for him to join because the possibilities, and the reason I mentioned that he has 13 people in his office is because he doesn't have to be the only one podcasting. We have multiple clients that have multiple people in their office that come join us on the show, on their show, run their podcast, do interviews, or just talk about their own topics. And that takes the burden, quote unquote burden, off of a primary of having to do every podcast every time. I think that kind of growth and that kind of growth within having 2 podcasts a month, or maybe even 4, when you have more people that can do it, that's just exponential exposure.
The other guy that you talked to had advisors in like 15 states, and he's like, well, how would we manage that? And we're like, well, we already managed that for a company who has advisors in 3 or 4 states, and we just we interview each of the advisors. And he's like, wait a second, so you mean I don't have to do it? No, you don't. Now you can, right? If you as the founder want to be the hub, that's fine. But this is why we have people like you, Aric and Patrice, to be able to help people navigate that stuff. That to me is the best thing that happens out of these conferences. Like I can do one-on-one calls, which I do a lot with financial services professionals who are interested in having a podcast as their marketing hub. Um, but being there and then having a couple of people show up and then hear the questions that they're asking so that they ask other questions. But there were 2 people who came in. These are people who I've known for quite a long time, and I'm going to highlight one of them very quickly, who runs 3 different schools and orphanages in Uganda. And so, as an advisor, he's pretty plain white toast. All right. I mean, he really is just a standard financial advisor, but he takes all of the profits that he gets from the firm and he funnels them because of his service heart to these schools in Uganda. And he's like, well, Matt, I really think I need to start a podcast. And I was like, that's what you need to podcast on, right? Because he goes there 2-3 times a year. I mean, Aric, could you imagine if he just had a Zoom recorder or something like that and he starts interviewing the kids and the staff there? We could have so much great content. And he's like, well, how would that benefit my financial services firm? I said, it's brought to you by your financial services firm, right? So what it's doing is it's still getting you exposure and visibility without having to talk about 401ks and Roth conversions and being a shill, right? What it shows is your heart. And that's why people do business with him, Aric. They don't do business with him because he's a great financial advisor. He's a good financial advisor. They do business with him because they know that some of the proceeds from their using him as an advisor is going to help hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids in Uganda because that's his heart, that's his passion. I thought that was pretty cool.
Matt, what else do we need to hear today from that conference? I don't want to take this on too long, but what else is really something that we need to highlight?
If you have a podcast already and it's not doing what you think a podcast should do, we're perfect for you, right? We will set all of the infrastructure in place so that your podcast starts to sing instead of just play. So there's number 1. Number 2, most of the advisors would come up to us and here's what they would say. I know I need to have a podcast. Now that's newer, right, brother? Before COVID, that stuff never happened. But so many advisors came up. I know I need to start a podcast. Well, what are you afraid of, or why haven't you started? And Aric, you talked about this a lot at the show. I don't know where to start. So if you are concerned that you don't know where to start, how to even think about a podcast, then they need to talk to us. That's really what we do. We've launched hundreds of podcasts now for financial services professionals. That whole launch sequence is one of our biggest strengths. But then the funny thing is not only can we help you get it started, but if you have a show and it's not living up to your expectations, let us take a look and see what's going on. So this guy this morning, as I wrap up, I listened to 8 minutes of his podcast. I knew everything I needed to know about his show in 8 minutes. I knew what he was doing well. I knew what he was having problems with. I looked at the show notes. I clicked on his syndication platform, all of that sort of stuff. You know, Kirk says this to me all the time. Matt, you know so much that you take for granted that most other people don't know. And I love having one-on-one, face-to-face, handshaking conversations with people because that helps me realize this is what's the most important to them. This is what I need to focus on. Where now we can get people up to speed pretty quickly on Zoom or virtual meetings, but I really do think if you're in either of those camps, which is 98% of our advisors, they really need to reach out. They need to give us a call. They need to find out where they are, what they can do, and where they can go from here. And I really do believe that we can solve that problem for them. What did you glean from this conference?
Bottom line is that the people that I met at this conference, there was a lot of people I already knew. Like it was really nice to reconnect with some folks. But the new people that I met, it's obvious why they were at this conference. Their heart is to impact their clients. Their heart is to make people's lives better, and they're pretty humble folks. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people have this misconception about financial advisors, or they're ranked a lot of times with some other professions that aren't that great, and it's not fair. I'll just be honest, it's not fair, because until you get to know somebody, you really don't know their heart. We get to know people at these conferences. We break bread with them, which I think is so important, and have true open discussions. And we get to hang out, right? How often do we get to hang out with these folks? Not often at all. It's a quick phone call here, a quick phone call there. This was 4 days of really relational building. And I just found that fantastic. I love it. I missed it. I'm glad we're back on the road, and I look forward to more.
All right. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you click that subscribe now button below. And if you have a moment, please give us a quick review on iTunes. And if you haven't checked out our free Pod Rocket Academy, please check out the Pod Rocket Academy. It's very, very easy to get to. It's proudmouth.com/academy. It is free to join. If you are a do-it-yourselfer, go here. Or most importantly, if you have a team member who really can help you accelerate your influence and really implement a great digital marketing strategy, have them join the Academy. The middle level is $99 a month, where you get access to just about every course that we have. But most importantly, a whole bunch of back-end live support, which nobody else does for $99. We'd love to have you there. So for Aric and me, both of us at ProudMouth, I'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon. Thanks for listening to the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast, brought to you by ProudMouth. If you want to know more about how you can be your own loud, visit us at proudmouth.com and sign up for the Pod Rocket Academy. Through courses and office hours led by professional podcast producers and digital marketers, you will learn everything you need to know to become the trusted subject matter expert you were meant to be.